and it's a pleasure for me to welcome you to Food Fight, a close look at the 2012 Farm Bill. About 8 years ago, we began to collect food studies materials to support the food studies program here at NYU, and Marion Nestle came to me and said, I know of this great collection.
You know what, this is not as good as the other one.
It's not as good. Okay, sorry about that.
I know.
Improvements. How's that?
There you go.
A little better? Okay. So Marion came to me and said, I know of this great collection. And I said, let's go take a look. And between then and now, we have amassed 55,000 volumes in the food studies collection here, making it the largest collection in the country. And it's not just the food studies program that uses the collection, however. It's also food studies have spread across all the departments. In fact, I know at least 3 dissertations in the English department that are based on food as well. So the revolution has happened. I always like to share a couple of new acquisitions with you, and so I have 3 new things today. Something else that's happened is the Les Dames d'Escoffier of New York gave us some funding to acquire very expensive items and rarities that we don't have. And I'd like to show today the first chef's cookbook. So this is where it all started, folks. This is the problem. It's Le Cuisinier Gascon, and it's from 1740. And written by a chef with all of his secrets, etc. I wonder if the recipes were as bad as most of them are today.
Marvin.
Well, it's true. I mean, yeah. This is very, very special. This we acquired last week. This is a 17th century English manuscript cookbook, which they're rare to begin with, but making it even more rare is we know the woman who owned it because it's signed. And this makes it exceptionally rare and really valuable. The first half is medicinal recipes, and then it splits. And the second half, it's all in 17th century English hand. It's probably what we would call a clean copy. So it was made probably as a gift, perhaps for the woman's wedding. That would be a typical time that these would be given. The second half is then all recipes, and some surprising ones for artichokes, how to preserve artichokes. So this is 1651 to 1655. A wonderful recipe that I actually would like to make for making boudin noir. And, oh, I love it. And, yeah, how to preserve quinces, how to preserve gooseberries. It's a really fascinating document. And then finally, just today, a third item came in that crosses over between Mr. Fales' fiction collection and the food studies collection. And this is London at Table, 1851. It's a guide to where to eat, what to eat, and where not to eat in London from 1851. And of course, that's important because that's the time that the Great Exposition's taking place. So probably produced in a large edition, but really rare because people threw it away. And so it's a little bit of a glimpse into the culinary world of London in the mid-19th century. So with that, we are continuing to acquire materials, especially early materials right now. The university has given us funds, general funds from the library to help at the acquisition of these kinds of materials. So yet another step forward in our attempts to build food studies materials. It's my pleasure now to introduce Clark Wolf, who's going to moderate today's panel. Thank you.
Thanks, Marvin. It really is exciting. You didn't mention that the volume that you were holding there was made out of sheepskin. I mean, it's the real deal, and it's free range, I'm sure, line caught. Welcome to part 1 of a 2-part conversation. You know, these critical topics in food series are designed to annoy you all lightly, gently, and make you want to learn more about the topics that we address. And so in this situation, there were so many wonderful people who are actually paying strong attention to our farm and food policy in this country these days. We are no longer screaming in the dark. We are no longer you know, clapping with one hand in the forest. Terrible mixed metaphor. But I want to tell you that I usually go to the farmer's market and the Green Market in Union Square the day before one of these and bring some things because for $100 we can get all kinds of stuff that we can nibble on and some nice wine that we bring in. Yesterday it was raining and kind of gray and the farmers weren't all there and none of them were in a good mood. It was, you know, wet farmers are not pretty. And well, actually a couple of them were, no. So I asked my assistant, Rachel, I said, we need to find a farmer's market I could stop on the way and get some things today. I mean, come on, it's New York City. This is 2012. Where's the farmer's market? So I brought some treats for you from the farmer's market at the Port Authority bus terminal inside. Thank you very much. We're getting somewhere, folks, right? Now, I will admit that I was photographed by a city official wanting to prove that somebody shopped at that farmer's market. But it was a wonderful moment, so please enjoy yourselves gingerly. There are 2 dates I want to tell you about. The second part of this conversation is May 31st, and it's going to be called, as you may have seen in the invitation, How Would Julia Child Have Voted on the Farm Bill of 2012? The culinarians' interests and obligations. What we want to talk about then is, today we're going to talk about policy and programs and community efforts and law building and business building, and there we're going to talk about we as food folk are involved in many ways, and we skim off the top, and how can we be involved, what's important to us. We have the woman who started the website Obama Foodorama. Any of you follow that? She's kind of brilliant. Eddie's kind of brilliant and smart, and we have a president of the United States who has policy in food that we actually follow on a regular basis. What a concept. You know what I mean? As opposed to just...
food policy.
Well, we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, wait. See, they're starting already. Apparently the farmers are still wet. And we'll also have Adam Rappaport of Bon Appetit magazine, and if you haven't seen it for a while, it's really extraordinary what's happened to America's largest foodie magazine in the last few months since he's been there. And we're also going to have, of course, Dr. Nestle will be with us again. Ginevra Iverson is a wonderful chef friend who, with her husband, Eric Korsch, is opening a restaurant in the East Village-ish area. I met her when she was out in California growing things all around her restaurant. She's moved back to New York and wants to do the same kind of thing and couldn't do it 10 years ago and feels that they can do it now. So there's a huge change there. And there's somebody else who I can't remember, but I'm probably going to remember in a minute. Also write down October 25th. It's a Thursday, I believe. And it is when the effort that Marvin worked very hard on all summer, and I've been helping with as well, with Rizzoli Books, we are proud to announce again that we are going to be publishing 101 classic cookbooks and 501 classic recipes from the Fales collection. It's going to be 101 books from the 20th century, starting with Fannie Merritt Farmer, and ending, I can tell you today, with Thomas Keller, somebody, you know, and some amazing cookbooks that represent not just the collected thoughts of a brilliant advisory committee that includes everyone from Alice Waters and Michael Pollan to Betty Fussell and Barbara Fairchild and all kinds of wonderful, smart people, but also reflects the range and depth of this collection. There's a lot here. So 101 is way too few to talk about, but all they'd let us put in the book. And the 501 recipes were gathered as an academic effort by graduates of the food studies program, by Karen, what's her last name? Oops. Well, Waverly Outhmuth, and I'll remember, what's her name? Come on, Janet Lowe, that's it, Janet Lowe, who worked with me to pull out the history, using Google but other research materials as well, of the last 100 years and what recipes were most written about, talked about, reviewed, discussed, and shared in the public discourse. And those recipes have been put into a cookbook at the end of this big book. So please come and join us to celebrate that and to meet some of the authors. But today we're going to talk about the Farm Bill. We're going to talk about the food we eat, and we have some extraordinary and wonderful people. Please welcome our friend, our colleague, our professor, back on the red eye from Rio de Janeiro this morning. Please welcome Dr. Marion Nestle. I had to do that. I don't know. I don't know how many of you know, but Marion and Malini Shawn together have written a wonderful book that's on the table out front for sale about calories. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, about why calories are so important in the discussion about a farm bill. What a concept, right? But Marion, you know, you've been addressing these things for a long time. Will you just set the stage and let us know a little bit about why we should be paying attention to the farm bill in America?
Oh, we should be paying attention to the farm bill because every single thing about agricultural policy is done through the farm bill, and everything that there is about, almost everything there is about our policies for feeding the poor. One of the most peculiar things about the Farm Bill is that 85% of its funding is for food stamps and pays for food stamps. Now, you will ask, what are food stamps doing in the Farm Bill? Politics. And the Farm Bill is totally about politics. I taught a course here at NYU last semester on the Farm Bill, and there are a bunch of students in my class who were here. And when the reason that I taught it was because the Farm Bill seemed so obscure to me. I just couldn't get my head around it, that I thought the best way to force myself to get my head around it would be to read everything that has ever been written about it, and that's pretty much what we did in the class. And at the end of it, we still couldn't get our head around it, even though I would say that every single one of the 43 students who took that class knows more about the Farm Bill than any legislator who's voting on it. And I say that because the Farm Bill is 663 pages of very, very tiny type, divided into 15 sections. It doesn't matter what they are. And each one of the section houses dozens and sometimes hundreds of programs. What the Farm Bill is not what you might expect it to be. You would think that the Farm Bill would reflect the best minds of our generation sitting around a conference table and saying, we need a food policy in this country that will feed everybody an adequate diet at a cost they can afford, will pay farmers an adequate wage and recompense for what they're producing, will be kind, gentle, and remunerative to farm workers, will promote health, will promote the production of fruits and vegetables, and will minimize some things that go into junk foods and that make people fat, will be fair in international trade. I'm leaving out a number of others of sort of what an ideal Farm Bill would accomplish. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is politics, pure and simple, in the ugliest way possible. This is about power politics in action. Anytime a member of an agricultural committee in either the House or Senate wants to do something for his or her constituents, something goes into the Farm Bill that will benefit those constituents. And it isn't just the big commodity payments like the ones that go to corn and soybean producers. It also is little teeny programs. Haas avocados have their own program. Honey has its own program. Little teeny things here and there. Of course, the little teeny ones don't get nearly as much money as the great big ones do. And to answer the question, what are food stamps doing in the Farm Bill, that's called log rolling. Log rolling is when I'll vote for your issues if you'll vote for mine. And the entire Farm Bill is about that. So, of course you can't understand it, because all it is a bag of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of programs, each with its own legislators, constituents, lobbyists, and people for whom the amount of money that's in that Farm Bill makes all the difference in the world. There are things in the Farm Bill that shocked even me. I didn't think I could be shocked by this kind of power politics, but one of the conclusions of our class, and I mention this because it's such a big issue on the table right now in the current fussing over the Farm Bill, has to do with crop insurance. After reading about crop insurance, my class said, how come we're not in the crop insurance business? What a great deal. The government takes all the risk and we get all the money. You know, and so if you're looking at crop insurance as the governors and the various legislators are arguing about it, keep in mind that there are large businesses, many of them international, that are making a lot of money off of crop insurance. And this, if you want to understand power politics, this is the perfect example of following the money. All you have to do is follow the money, and you'll understand the Farm Bill better than most legislators.
That's why we let her go first. Thank you, Marion. Now, and before we go further, how many of you are in that class or in the program at Food Studies yourselves? Okay, so vote for them. All right. Now, that being said, and I also want to say that there are many things in this bill that are extraordinary. We'll talk about them. Not all of them belong there, and some of them might even be okay if they weren't there and if they were in a different context. That's my opinion. And so what I want to do is I'm going to jump over Dan, and I want to get to Ned Porter, because I'm going to talk about an organization, and I want him to talk about an organization that actually does work with food stamps, and that actually does do a lot of things with farm and food for people out there who are struggling and trying to live and trying to do healthy things. Wholesome Wave, he'll tell you more about it, but it's part of the group that has been funded by the work and money raised by Paul Newman. And, you know, we've had Gus Schumacher here before and Michel Nichon, good friends. Gus has joined them a little bit more recently as the Director of National and Regional Policy. And he was an ag guy from Maine?
Yeah.
From Maine, all right. And he knows his stuff, and he's going to tell us some of it. So, Ned, pull the mic closer to you. You have your own. Make yourself comfortable. No, closer. It won't bite. It's not interactive. So, Ned, tell us a little bit about Wholesome Wave and about what's going on and what positive things there are that are associated with food stamps and getting people healthy food.
Wholesome Wave is a nonprofit based in Bridgeport, Connecticut. I work for it out of home in gleefully out of home in Brunswick, Maine. We work with partners in 28 states. We have 3 programs. One provides a framework of assistance, technical and financial assistance to partners who run markets to provide incentives to encourage people on federal nutrition benefits, receiving federal nutrition benefits, to buy more locally grown fruit and vegetables through farmers markets. And we work with 300 markets and 2,300 farmers. And we'll be celebrating our 5th year this June. That's our core program. We also have 2 more. One is a fruit and vegetable prescription program that it links nutritionally at-risk populations, public health clinics and farmers markets in a closed loop. It's really exciting. And then our third is a healthy food commerce, where our double value program would establish a link between farm country and underserved communities through a farmers market. Our healthy food commerce strengthens that chain of commerce through investment to create infrastructure and jobs that fatten that pipeline to get more locally grown food into food deserts. I've been doing it for 14 months. Just a little background to tell you why I am here. I used to be I'm a recovering reporter in recovery. I had been, my first job out of school was as a reporter. And I got to know a prominent political family in Maine very well, and John Baldacci got elected to Congress. I said, Ned, come on down, we'll have a big time. And he got on the House Ag Committee, so in 1995 I became an expert for the state of Maine on ag policy. And then flash forward is I got asked to come back and appointed in 2001 to be Deputy Commissioner of the Maine Department of Agriculture, and I survived 2 governors, 2 commissioners in 10 years, and then new governor got elected, and I lasted a week with the Republicans, so I was unappointed but not disappointed. So what we do is what I do is I take the stories, and anybody who frequents farmers markets knows there's wonderful stories of the benefit they provide to the consumer of fresh local produce, to the farmer of benefiting direct sales. I take those stories and the data. We're rigorous in requiring our partners to collect data, and we try to inform the debate on the Hill in terms of Congress. How do we change policy to meet the goals of getting more locally grown fresh produce into the diets of those people who need it the most?
Ned, I want to just interrupt. I want to explain, you know, large food producers, so-called food producers, have all kinds of widgets that they can count, and they're always throwing enormous amounts of data. And the problem is, we've known for years that good food is good for you. What a concept. But there's nobody collecting data. So the reason I'm excited about this is when I'm in Northern California in Santa Rosa, there's a program at the farmers market there where doctors are prescribing fruits and vegetables, some to women who are pregnant and and are given cooking lessons and classes and taught how to cook without, some without, and some are not given any of the good food stamps for fruits at all. And they're tracking the health of the unborn children so that we can know what really happens. I'm sorry, but it's such a great program. I want to give you credit for that. It actually works.
Our FVRX. And between my time on the Hill, the Freedom of the Farm Act in 95, 96, this will be my fourth, I think, Farm Bill. And in the core, I just want to give a really, what Dr. Nestle has done is changed the terms of the debate big time. I can go into when I visit somebody on the Hill, a staffer, and I'm pitching healthy food, local food, benefit farmers, local food systems, there's a glint of recognition. I don't need an interpreter when I'm talking to them, and that's because of the work Marion has been doing all these years to change the debate, and it's been invaluable. But if I can, what we have is the Senate Ag Committee Chairwoman Debbie Stabenow of Michigan and the ranking minority member Pat Roberts, a senator from Kansas, released their mark. The last one, how many pages did you say the last one was?
663.
This one.
I just happen to know that.
Well, I just happen to know this one's an even 900 pages, so there's another 267 pages of monkey business in it, and we're going to find it. Or next year's graduate class can. But we were really, I mean, there's a lot. They got rid of direct payments, which is good, but they took that money and put it into deepening the subsidies for crop insurance, which isn't so good. And if any of you paid attention, you'll see the Southern boys backed away from the compromise at the last minute when the Congressional Budget Office released its score, and they didn't get as much money in crop insurance subsidy as they thought they were going to get, so they backed away from the compromise. But from my little slice of heaven, we have the Wholesome Wave Pick 6, and we're really glad these changes are in there. And at some point, I can do them now, or at some point
We'll do them in a little bit.
Yep.
But I don't know about you, but I'm overwhelmed so far. Everybody overwhelmed so far? Because I'm completely confused. All right, we'll get there. But Marion, you did warn us that we would be. Thank you, Ned. Yep. I want to say that, by the way, I remembered, because I picked up this piece of paper, that the fifth person who's going to be with us on the 31st is Tracy McMillan, who's the author of The American Way of Eating. I mean, it's a very frightening, wonderful, brilliant book. And that is a perfect segue to Abby Youngblood, because I met Abby's group at a conference that we didn't hear a whole lot about, and that was here in New York City and absolutely packed, cheek by jowl. And it's the second, third, third? Who knows?
Fourth. It's come in different forms.
All right. All right. So anyway, Abby Youngblood is from Just Food. Please welcome Abby Youngblood. So,
thanks so much.
Abby, after all that, so tell us a little bit about Just Food, what it is, and how you guys are working with programs like these and in support of good stuff. No, it doesn't work?
That one doesn't seem to work. But
Ned's really friendly. He'll let you have his.
Right.
you can even take it out and I'll just...
It's a line-caught microphone. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah,
Golly, there's a solution.
Sorry.
that's all right.
Who's got the music going?
Yeah, a little cardio exercise in the middle. There we go. Okay.
Okay. Thanks so much, Clark. So how many folks in the room are familiar already with Just Food, just so I have a sense of my audience? Okay.
Okay.
So you know that Just Food is working to connect New York City residents of all backgrounds with fresh food from local farms. And we've been doing this work since 1995. We've been helping to start CSA programs here in the city, community-supported agriculture programs. And now there's over 100 CSAs in New York City, which is really exciting. But the work that I've been doing for the last 4 years is our Farm to Food Pantry project. So I've been working with some of the most vulnerable communities here in the city to make sure that there's access to good food in those communities as well. And just tying into what Dr. Nestle was saying about food stamps, which is now called the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP. It's tied into the Farm Bill. It's a huge part of the Farm Bill, and it's a program that is very much being threatened. And being out in the field, I work with 50 different food pantries in all 5 boroughs. I see the need, and I see how families are really struggling right now to have enough money to buy food. I see that the food pantries and soup kitchens are overwhelmed because food stamps doesn't stretch through the whole month. And so right now the threat is that this program is on the chopping block in both the Senate and the House. The House wants to cut it big time. The Senate and the mark that just the Senate bill that's about to go to the Senate floor has about $4 billion of cuts being proposed to the food stamp program. And that would affect literally hundreds of thousands of New York households. And for those households that it would impact, it would mean $90 per month less in food stamp benefits. So this is a big deal to New York City. I also just want to mention that Just Food works on both ends of the equation. We also work with farmers. And when we say farmers, we're talking urban farmers and rural farmers. And I myself was a farmer before I moved to New York City. I grew vegetables in upstate New York. And just speaking to some of the farmer issues, we know that the Farm Bill doesn't work for small, diversified family farms that are growing healthy food. Here in New York State, we're a dairy state. We also grow lots of different fruits and vegetables. We grow food, we produce food that's healthy. But these are not the farmers who are benefiting from the federal dollars. Getting to the crop insurance, we had 2 natural disasters back to back. We had Hurricane Irene and Tropical Storm Lee. And here in the city, we're like, oh, you know, Irene, it wasn't anything. But for our farms, it was a really big deal. There were tens of thousands of dollars in losses on our farms. And some of those farms were insured, but the crop insurance programs were not working for our farms that suffered natural disasters. So we call it the Food and Farm Bill, food being this whole food stamp nutrition piece that's in it, and then the farming part. And Just Food, along with Hunger Action Network of New York State, convened the New York City Food and Farm Bill Working Group. We've been working now for about 2 years, and there's a lot of working group members in the room. Our group has been working for 2 years now trying to understand what the Farm Bill is and to engage in the process. And it's anti-hunger groups, it's faith-based groups. We've got food justice and farming related groups involved, and it's also just ordinary citizens who want to get involved. So if you're interested in taking a more active role, I'd really encourage you to either go to justfood.org and sign up for our e-newsletter, which comes out once a month. And we're really tuning in right now to the Farm Bill because either it's going to happen or it's not. This spring, probably not. But also, if you want to come by after the panel's over to the reception, there's these yellow cards, and it says more about the New York City Food and Farm Bill Working Group. We have adopted a set of principles that we want to see incorporated, and we're asking individuals and organizations to sign on to the principles that we've adopted. So there's a lot of opportunities to get more involved.
Abby, thank you so much for moving to New York to help our farmers and our eaters, otherwise known as everybody. Thank you. All right. So the catalyst for this conversation today is the gentleman who wrote and published this book. Dan Imhoff works and lives not far from where I am in Northern California, up in the Healdsburg area, which is really a beautiful, magical place. But he publishes really wonderful, thoughtful, smart publications, books of all kinds of writing, many of which relate to and address the magic and the reality of food. And first of all, welcome. Thank you for coming to New York, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. So, Dan, you've heard all of this. Marion gave us the kitchen sink version, and Ned told us about the application of very focused programs and how they can and are being turned into something. And Abby talked about the street fight. So it's now 2012 and it's this year. You've been looking at this and writing about it for a long time. Give us an action plan or the list of the things we can learn and do now, not just as New Yorkers, as Abby talked about, but as Americans, wherever we live. What can we, because we're learning every day because there's too darn much to learn, right? Or unlearn. How do we address this bill, Dan?
I'm going to step back for a second. Thank you, Clark, and thank you, Marvin and Fales Library and everybody for being here. It's nice to see a room full of people who have come to talk about the Farm Bill. And I think that that tells us where we are in time, that we citizens realize that there are things wrong with the way we're feeding and farming and treating the land, and that we really need to get involved because things aren't happening at the federal level. And that's what the Farm Bill is. It's really the government. It's a very, very simple question. What is government's role in the food system? And when you ask that, then you say, okay, what is the food system? And I think that's anywhere from how we grow the food and support the people who, the farming communities that produce food, but then also take care of folks who don't have enough to eat. I think, like, if we didn't have a Farm Bill, it would almost be like our Constitution, our democracy not having a Constitution. I mean, it's a living document. It's something that started in the Great Depression, and it was really a response to a catastrophic collapse, economic collapse, environmental collapse of the food system. And every 5 years, we get this chance to revisit and see where we're going priority-wise. And if Congress doesn't act by September 30th, then they most likely have to extend the bill that we have today. And as we've heard, the Senate has put forth its markup, its bill. It was actually a bill that was crafted behind closed doors in November in response to this serious black cloud of budget cuts. It's a specter that haunts all government agencies right now. And I think the senators at the Senate Ag Committee, a very, very small number of them, from what I've been told, it was a very closed-door process, and it got probably the least amount of public input of any farm bill in recent history. And there's a lot of frustrated people around it. I rewrote Food Fight because so much had changed since the 2007 Farm Bill, when I really rushed to get the first edition around and what Marion out on the street. And again, I think when you're looking at the food system and what are some of the big things, the big challenges that's going to take a generation to address, really, federal policy is one. Antibiotics and large-scale livestock production is another. This huge concentration and lack of antitrust enforcement in the food industry itself. Places that are so desperate for economic development that environmental regulations are friendly to huge pollutive industries. And so, again, we can't ignore this federal policy that comes up every 5 years, even if we feel powerless to impact the system. This issue of crop insurance is absolutely insane. You know, just when you think that you've seen the most egregious money grab known to man, in comes another one. So what we're going to hear a lot about, I think, from Big Ag is that farmers need a safety net. Okay, we're living in, it's very expensive to farm. There is extreme climate challenges that we face right now. We have growing populations. Farmers need to have this assurance that they can get a crop out. You have to go back to that early document, that early social contract that the first Farm Bill established in the Great Depression, where it was really a conservation bill. This was a soil protection bill. And so if you received assistance from the government and it didn't come in the form of a direct payment, of a subsidy, it came in the form usually of a loan. And in order to get to receive that loan, you had to participate in a market regulation program that they had, meaning that you had to idle 25% of your plantable acreage. And what did that do? Well, that kept 25% of the acreage from the plow, good news for the soil, good news for the water, good news for any critters that are living in that ecosystem. And also it meant 25% less crops on the market, which would hopefully boost the prices for farmers. So if we fast forward to today's safety net, we have a very small number of huge farms that use the subsidies. They're no longer loans. There's no longer any conservation requirements attached to those payments. You have an ethanol gold rush that's putting 40 million acres of corn into our gas tanks. And there is absolutely nothing that we taxpayers get in return for that. There's no assurance that they're not going to plant highly erodible soils. I read Colin Peterson, who used to be the House Ag Committee chairman, write that in his district they're taking rocks the size of barns out of fields to plant fields that are never going to produce a crop. But there's no problem because our government is going to ensure them revenue through the crop insurance plan. So, one thing that we can get our arms around is really there shouldn't be any subsidization without a social obligation. And we have to ask ourselves, well, what do we get for producing 95 million acres of corn? That would be a cornfield bigger than the size of Montana, one of our largest states. Well, we should at least get soil protection for the next generation, and we should at least get clean water and habitat, and there should be conservation requirements in return for this outrageous crop insurance scheme that is trying to be shoved down our throats right now, and say that it's a safety net for small farmers. There's no eligibility requirements. There's no cap on how much you can get. There was a fantastic op-ed in the Washington Post last weekend. I'll just quote a few statistics. The GAO reports that 33,690 farms, 3.9% of all the operators that received crop insurance got 1/3 of all the subsidies. So 4% of the operations got 1/3 of all the subsidies. It was over $2 billion. One entity got over $1 million, and 53 got over $500,000. So this is not really a safety net program. This is an income stream that allows the big to get bigger and go into lands that should absolutely not be plowed with no repercussions right now. Another big savings in this bill are cuts to the Conservation Reserve Program. They're expecting up to 7 million acres of idled land to go out of contracts, which is, I think it's 20%, 1/5 of all the land right now that we even have idled. It's hugely important to keep land not being plowed for climate reasons, for many reasons that I've already said. And also because what do we do with the foods that we're subsidizing? We're mainly feeding them to animals in confinement, right? So we don't eat the corn that's grown on the 90 million acres directly, and we don't eat much of the soy, not directly. And even cotton is a huge animal crop. And it's something that as we look toward the long term, which I advise everyone who cares about the food system change to do, we really have to move from supporting big animal agriculture towards something that's much more diversified and healthy.
Yeah, Dan, we'll come back to you in a moment, but I mean, thanks for that mouthful, really. I want to go back. I want to take a page of your book, and I want to ask Marion first, and then the rest of you. And by the way, we've passed out 3x5 cards. So if you have a question, pass them to the center. We'll walk through it and collect them so that we can ask some of your questions. On page something or other here, and Marion, these are a couple of plates you might know. Do you guys all know what these are? Right, my plate. Right. Remember the pyramid with the guy in tights? That was not good. Right. He just looked like he was going to Equinox, right? He was going anyway. But here is, after a lot of time, my plate is a way of telling people what, generally speaking, as a culture, we think you ought to eat. And then there's Ag Subsidy Plate, which has no correlation. I'm going to give this to you and let you guys pass this down, Will you tell us a little bit about what you think nutrition ought to tell us about farm policy?
Yeah, starting in the last Farm Bill and then heading into this one, there's been a big movement to try to make agricultural policy support health policy in the United States, which it currently does not do. Most of the subsidies and most of the money goes to big agriculture, corn, soybeans, cotton, and you didn't mention ethanol.
Gas tanks.
Which is a gas tanks is the other one. We're feeding cars, not people. And this has had an enormous impact on world food prices, on hunger in developing countries, and it isn't doing much for the health of Americans either. One part of the Department of Agriculture tells Americans that half your plate ought to be fruits and vegetables. The agricultural subsidies, however, go to meat and dairy of 63%, Dan says here, grains 20%, 15% to sugar, starch, oil, and alcohol, and roughly 2% to fruits and vegetables. There's something wrong with that picture. So we have a schizophrenic Department of Agriculture in which health policy and agricultural policy are completely divorced from one another. And the kinds of things that Wholesome Wave is trying to do is to try to align agricultural policy with health policy in at least small ways, and the hope is to get a few millions or hundreds of millions, if not into the Farm Bill to support fruit and vegetable production, to support fruits and vegetable prices for people in the SNAP program, and to do some other things that would benefit producers of fruits and vegetables, in the hopes that if you get a foot in the door now, eventually that will lead to a healthier farm policy.
Ned, you want to comment on that?
Yeah. One thing I've noticed over time, and sort of addressing the disparity between the healthy plate and the subsidy plate, there are two political forces come to play that haven't typically played in the food and nutrition and farm bill. And I think Dan touched on one in his book. I liken it to 45 years ago when the insurance companies started realizing how much our tobacco policy was costing them. They started stacking the deck in Congress to get the laws changed. And I see health insurance companies, whatever else you may think they are, they are understanding they are at a tipping point that our food policy is costing them money. And when the health insurance industry starts getting people on the Ag Committee to look out for their interests, but the health interest, that changes the game. And another thing that is really exciting, because it's a powerful voice, is, and it's led in this, the big city mayors have come together. Tom Menino in Boston has advocated and got a group together at the U.S. Conference of Mayors. And Kim Kessler with Mayor Bloomberg's office was instrumental in getting a letter weighing in to the senators on the Ag Committee, and it was signed by 10 big city mayors. And if you're talking raw power, those guys represent more votes than the Ag Committee does. So the members of Congress in those cities are going to take notice. And the first, I just happened to bring with me the mayor's letter, and it's maintained current benefit levels for SNAP, strengthen emergency food assistance, full funding for commodity. So this is a lot of pressure come to bear to change it to align the two plates. And I think that's a good thing.
Abby?
I think, sprinkled throughout the Farm Bill are these little itty-bitty programs, like the Farmers Market Nutrition Program, which provides coupons to seniors and to parents of young children who are in the WIC program to go buy food at the farmer's market. And there are the community food projects and grants to help beginning farmers. Actually, Just Food has a grant that funds Farm School NYC, which is to help people grow food right here in the city and to also engage their communities in the process and in community organizing around food issues. So sprinkled in the Farm Bill are these little tiny programs that help support healthy eating in communities that need it the most. And it's interesting looking at what different groups are saying right now, because the Senate has put forward a bill which has some terrible things in it related to basically more subsidies for corporate agriculture. And then it has some good things in it that would increase healthy food access. And then it has these billions of dollars of cuts to the food stamp program, the SNAP program, which is viewed right now as kind of the floor, because the House is going to push even harder on that. And we're in this situation where some people believe that the longer we wait to pass this bill, the worse the cuts are going to get, because there's such a climate right now of deficit reduction. So I think that's the real tension, the real challenge right now. We know we need to change our food system. We know we need to make healthy food more accessible to people, and there are some great programs that help do that. But given the political landscape, how far are we going to be able to push that?
Well, actually, all right. So, Dan, before we go any further, somebody wanted to know, how is cotton a huge animal crop? I think it's a fair question.
Cottonseed.
Yeah, cotton is 60–70% seed by weight. So the fiber is almost a secondary crop to it. It's an oil seed primarily. So
Got it.
wherever you see a lot of cotton, you also see a lot of dairy. It's fed to dairy cows because it's a quick butter fat gainer. A couple things about the rise of cities. I think it's essential for sure. There's no way that you pass a farm bill without food stamps. And that's basically the dance. That's the way the deal is made.
Log rolling.
Yeah, I mean, and what does a representative who has no farming get for supporting these big agricultural programs? Well, increasingly they get food stamps, and food stamps have really become the new welfare, because there's really very little financial assistance to folks who are poor. It's an incredibly small amount of money. If you're a family of three grossing over $24,000, I think you're ineligible for food stamps, and it's a very small amount of money. These programs that double your purchasing power for fruits and vegetables are amazingly powerful. One idea that we could have, how many people watch The Daily Show, get their news from the Comedy Channel?
Come on.
We could take a page from Stephen Colbert and start our own super PAC. I think it's pretty easy to, set one up and buy our own bill. I think in general we would have to pay less than the big industry does. Mm-hmm. There are millions of us. And if we all gave $20 or $40, I think that we could get a bill that really included a lot of things that are dropped out of this one. The final thing that I would really encourage is that, we shouldn't have to vote for a bad bill. We should at least be able to let our representatives know that we're not happy with the bill as it comes out. We have to watch, and to tell them that we're watching, and their vote really counts, because it used to be the Farm Bill was the bill that mattered least. And yet cities are realizing they have obesity problems. They want to feed their kids more healthfully. They have this dynamic new food movement that's emerging between rural and urban interfaces that could really use a lot of these $30,000, $50,000, $10,000 investments to build capacity. And a final note would be, maybe the Defense Department could be our friend. Mm-hmm. Since they've got all the money, and they don't seem to be under any threat of being decreased. If you look into the literature, you will find actually a lot of studies where the Defense Department cares a lot about food. One of them is called Too Fat to Fight. Right. Came out in 2010. They basically have all these hundreds of retired generals who signed on to this report that said we're having trouble recruiting healthy people to fight. Yep. And the ones that we're were recruiting or having trouble maintaining their healthy weight. And it's been said, I think, $10 billion would do a lot for the school lunch program. Well, if they want healthy soldiers, maybe they could contribute to that. And I don't think it's unwieldy to even ask them.
Well, and as a matter of fact, there are a lot of communities that have returning veterans farm programs that are astounding and wonderful, and people who have a pent-up desire to do something of value when they come back to this country. And I think we have an obligation to do something about it. All right, look, we can go on for 400 years with this. I want each of you to give something for us to remember when we go out of here and start drinking wine and eating donuts that I bought at the Port Authority. Ned, give us a word.
The highlight of the Wholesome Wave quick pick, the pick 6 in the Farm Bill, is something called the Hunger-Free Community Incentive Grants. It's $100 million over 5 years. It provides federal funding to do the kind of work we do. Establish nutrition incentive programs to increase fruit and vegetable purchases by SNAP customers at farmers markets. It's a, I was going to say hell of a, but it's a hell of a program.
You can say that at a university. It's a hell of a program.
And
you're not allowed to say it's a no-brainer. We don't say that at
But we got to we're going to work like the Dickens to make sure it survives in the bill on the Senate side, and it has support on the House side, and we're working like
the Dickens, right? Abby?
Come to the Brooklyn Food Conference on May 12th, Saturday, May 12th. Our wonderful team, the New York City Food and Farm Bill Working Group, has more workshops. And remember, our Senator Gillibrand, is on the Ag Committee. Yeah. And she voted against the Senate bill because of the cuts to food stamps. So we're a player. New York State is a player in this Farm Bill, and become engaged. Let Senator Gillibrand, she's on our side, but let her know that you're watching.
Okay, and Marion, I'm going to ask you, say a word of what people should think about, especially if they are people who study and work in the field of nutrition.
Try to find out as much about the bill as you possibly can. Read Dan's book. I'll give it a plug. It really explains the issues very well. Pick the issue that gets to your heart. Find a group that's working on it. Join them. Find out who your senators and representatives are. If any of them is on the Ag Committee, that's where the pressure goes. And make sure they know what you think about this, what you really care about. Let them know.
Dan? Last word.
Let's be clear about the type of food system that we want. And I think health is a major, great umbrella at which we can all agree on what the future of food should be. And the Grace Foundation has brought this great speech from the Prince of Wales. They published it in this small book, and they've brought to me about 20 or 25 books. I strongly recommend you look at the Prince's language as he envisions a different food system and argues for changes, including subsidies. So the first 25 people who are up here can get a copy of this book.
And if you want a copy of Dan's book or Marion's book about calories, they're actually for sale by the bookstore. These are people you want to spend some time with, so please do so. Let's thank them all. And thank you all for coming. Please join us in the